Hello, everyone, and happy Halloween. We are having an absolutely terrifying conversation around how AI agents fit into your overall environment. So, the reason we really wanted to dig into this today, I'll give you kind of a little intro before I go into the logistics and let Adam introduce yourself. But today, we really wanted to go in like, what are AI agents? How do they fit into our conversation? And what do they look like as far as digital strategy? And the reason for that is we see them used in the wrong way a lot of times. And we also see them as an opportunity to lack integrity when it comes to actual structural conversation in technology strategy. So we want to make sure we give you those tools to be able to navigate it as everyone is talking about AI agents are the next big thing. And maybe they are, right? But they have to make sense for your business. And that's really what our mission is here. And to describe that, we build AI agents for different businesses, and we talk about kind of our approach of like, we don't want your data. And if you have a partner that does, that's a big red flag. And we'll kind of go into what you can look for from an actual partner, not a hostage situation, right? So with that, I'm Kyler Cheatham. We are from the Confluential here. And if you have anything to add to this conversation, any questions, you can ask that in real time. Even if you're on the replay, we always go back in and answer the questions. But that's the important part about these conversations. It's not really about what we say, right? And what we're seeing, it's about what works best for your business. And doing that really understands the options in the marketplace. So just to test that feature, if you could drop where you're joining from today, we'd love to see where our audience is from and joining this conversation this morning. So Adam, welcome. If you could just give us a quick intro as you always do and kind of let us know what you're seeing as far as AI agents in bigger system ecosystems.
Yeah, so good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining and listening from. My name's Adam Cheatham. I'm the CEO of The Confluential. I love this conversation because it really gets down to what is it that we are supposed to be thinking we should do with AI, right? Um, every organization out there has a plan for AI, whether or not they realize it. And some of them are just to use AI, which isn't enough. Some of them are, we're not talking about that yet, which is not having a plan is planning to not have a plan, right? So it's kind of a bit circular in that. But what we're finding is the folks that have the most success with AI are particular about it, and they're able to approach it in a manner that helps serve the needs of the business and makes it kind of a bite-sized approach for them. So what we'll talk about today is how does AI and AI agents fit into your overall enterprise ecosystem from a technology perspective? How should you use them? What should their purposes be? Those types of things, so that we can get a good bit of best practice around it, and we can work from there.
Yeah. So as always, I'd love to start with defining it, right? So what is an AI agent?
Yes. So you have Gen AI and you have AI agents, agentic AI. You have all of these different things, and definitions they swirl a bit. But generative AI is something that creates new content from existing content, right? So you ask ChatGPT a list of questions, tell me about this, that, and the other. Here, create a picture or whatever. It's generating something.
Mm-hmm.
Agentic AI is more something that takes an action, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's something that you want to change something for you, not create some type of an asset or a data piece for me,
Mm-hmm.
but conduct an action, facilitate a workflow, for example,
Mm-hmm.
is more agentic. And AI agents are the things that do these things, right? So you can have a generative AI agent. You can have a number of different agents that facilitate different types of workflows, and those are the ways that at least I think about it, so that you
Mm-hmm.
have some clarity on definitions and bits and pieces.
Absolutely. So I think for this conversation, I always think, and you tell me if this is wrong or right. the easiest way for me to understand agentic AI is like a thermostat, right? If I'm in a room in which I need to keep food refrigerated and the room temperature is getting too hot because my warehouse is in Houston, right? And it measures that, perceives it, right? Measures the situation,
Mhm.
turns down the temperature in the room. Correct? Yes or no?
Yeah, sure. You can do that. Like it's recognizing a condition and it's responding to it, right? So,
Mhm.
um, your thermostats today aren't AI oriented, right? They're data oriented, and this is
Mhm.
actually one of those things that, like the Nest thermostats, and you can
Yes.
control it from far away, and you can have it do this, that, and the other. All of those are good data points and data things that are autonomous. They react to a set of circumstances. When you start getting into artificial intelligence and the generative AI and the reactive component of it, the real ability of AI is to have some sense of learning and then applying a learned scenario to a future model, which some of those things can do, right? Your Nest thermostat will learn when you're home and when you're not, and start to say, Kyler's going to come home at this point in time, and so I'm going to turn the temperature to her liking, and Adam's been traveling, so we're going to keep the temperature higher because Kyler likes it that way. Whatever.
I do,
um,
unapologetically, just so you know.
uh, but at the end
Toasted.
of the day, when we're talking about the difference between AI and business intelligence, there is a difference, right?
Mhm.
So business intelligence is very much more like crunching data in a way that gives you an answer. It's a bit more like dumbs down generative AI, create a report from this data. But you have to do a lot of the work. And then in a generative AI scenario, you can say, create a report that tells me this, that, and the other. And an AI agent will create that report for you instead of doing the actual work,
Mhm.
instead of you having to do the actual work. So and that's one of the things that I think is so
Yeah.
interesting in this industry from an AI perspective is the tools that are going and actually doing something innovative and the tools that have just rebranded their business intelligence as AI. And that's a different thing. So
Mhm. And I mean, we see that all the time in the marketplace. The not only the customer confused between what is business intelligence and what is artificial intelligence, but also the systems kind of not only rebranding, which we see all the time, right? We've seen big software rebrand their existing technology to look innovative so that you buy it, but
mhm.
also this rise of this taking advantage of that misunderstanding. And I think that's our biggest goal here in having these conversations because it is confusing, right? Um, Especially when we're looking at agents, because it's easier to kind of slip under the hood for some of those because they're often specialized.
Yeah.
So having that conversation in that. So in moving on to actual strategic approaches and value that AI agents can bring, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and I think that it actually doesn't have to be moving on from the topic of the difference between AI and business
Sure.
intelligence, because I think
Good
at
point.
the end, the way that I think about it really is more along the lines of, is it really does it really matter what we call
Yeah.
it? Right? It doesn't actually. It's the same. I mean, we've been talking about this conversation with enterprise software applications for ages. Does it matter if it's an ERP or a financial management system or a
Mhm.
CRM or whatever? No, actually, it doesn't. You can call it whatever you want. The question is, does it fit the needs of the business in a way that is cost effective and value add?
Mhm.
Right? That might maybe a business intelligence tool is what you need. I talked to tons and tons of folks over my career who say, I need advanced business intelligence because I can't get a report out of IT. Actually, you just need basic business
Mhm.
intelligence where you
Yeah.
can drag and drop your own reports. That's not advanced at all. It might seem like that to you. So
Yeah,
where
exactly.
you sit in the what's AI versus BI versus agentic versus whatever doesn't need to dictate what your answer and solution is. So what
Yeah,
from a
great
strategic
point.
perspective, you kind of have to think about yourself from a maturity perspective, and not like, he, that's funny, he said that, he said a funny word, but more like your technical maturity, right? Are you capable of having data that is useful to some type of an application, right? That's a very important technical maturity question. And if you're not, you need to solve that problem first. Yeah. So let's assume we have some, and we're capable enough to start talking about technology. Then we start saying, all right, what is it that we're trying to achieve with technology? And it being the end of all of the quarter end stuff
Yeah.
wrapping up, you might be thinking, I want my payroll taxes to be, I want AI to handle my payroll taxes. And actually, all you really need to do is integrate your state, federal,
Yeah.
local government into your payroll system, or and have it do that for you. That's not, AI doesn't need to do that, right? So what are our problems that we're trying to solve?
Mm-hmm.
Then what can we do to use technology to help solve those? And having my payments from my payroll taxes all come out quarterly the way that they're supposed to isn't something that requires AI. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
mean that I don't have a problem with it. We do just fine with automations, and it's all integrated and it's handled for me. Now, if I wanted to do something more like, how can I reduce my tax exposure from
Mm-hmm.
a payroll perspective based on the activities that I conducted over the last 3 to 4 quarters, in advance of the next tax planning year? That's a different question, right? Automation is not going to help with that. There's some thinking involved in it. That's where that thinking can be more AI enabled, right? An AI agent could say, look at my payroll taxes, look at the
Mm-hmm.
way that we've been hiring, look at the way that we've been paying our taxes, and say, you know, um, you seem to be at a growth rate of this from an employment
Mm-hmm.
perspective. So you should plan for your payroll taxes to go in this direction,
Mm-hmm.
and it'll change this way for the federal government versus the state. And asking an agent to do that might be a bit more effective, right? I like to think of it more of a, if you can ask a person a question and go from there and expect them to answer it intelligently, you can ask an agent that same question.
Yeah. I think that that's a great way to kind of look at it from the like chatbot perspective, which I also think is like a kind of a misunderstood tactic, right? The chatbot can be a variety of different things. But when it comes to an actually useful chatbot, it should be able to have that agentic mindset of where it's able to answer some question or provide some sort
Mhm.
of, especially when we're looking at kind of the rise of the IT help desk. That's a where a lot of people are putting these certain agents, and I think that's a good spot for them to a point, right? As long as they're working, and that's the thing I think we miss a lot is like, is it providing value, and how are
Mhm.
you proving that value? If you're able to, decrease tickets by 30% and you're able to garner those data points of what are the main themes of those questions and how do we go about strategically addressing them before they're filling up our IT ticket help desk type of thing, then that's a great use case. But we have to find the problem and make sure that it's continuing
Yeah.
to surface.
Well, that's that again. That's when you get back to the strategy question that you asked. You need to know what it is you're trying to solve. What question is it that we're looking for the answer to, and then how do we want to answer that, and then how do we answer it effectively with AI becomes a part of the conversation. And there are a couple of ways of getting after it from a planning perspective. One of them is to think about things from a basic scenario. What do I need to be able to do to run my business? And then what are some of the more innovative things that we want to grow into? So, innovation, AI can serve as an innovative strategy, and we can work through it that way, or we can use AI as an answer that drives a question that we haven't asked yet, and the latter is really what causes some problems. So figure out what you're trying to solve, and then figure out how you're going to solve it. You write your requirements from that, and then you build agents around it. That's how that ought to be set up. And you hire the same way, right? Think of it. That's one of the things that I like to think about with AI. I need to hire for a position. Think about all of the requisitioning questions you get when you say I want to hire for a position in your company. And HR was still, what's the job description? What do you need? Your boss wants to know how much it's going to cost. How do I, what am I going to approve, and all these things. And then you go through a vetting process, right? Don't skip the legwork.
Yeah.
From a bodybuilding perspective, they say don't skip leg day, right? So it's something that you want to go through all of those things and then ask those questions and figure them out so that we can have a good answer to what it is we're trying to do.
Yeah. Don't skip leg day. Absolutely. I think some of these questions I'm going to pull up here are helpful in that this is more of kind of comment. Traditional development assumed if something crashed on error, it had a clear failure mode. Then when we were doing our jobs, because we could kill that microservice and restart it, and it won't slow down the rest of the system. But now, sorry, it's a two-part question, so I'm bringing the other part up now. But now we have failures that are hard to detect, such as hallucinations and content drift. And so this piece of it is really trying to understand the new way of managing these types of tools, right? It's a different type of development, correct?
It is, and it's a different type of governance, right? And this is why I think that thinking about how we hire people and manage people is also important, right? You don't hire somebody and send them off to do a job and never supervise them again and never check their work again, because they may make massive mistakes like people do. The same way AI can make massive hallucinations. It will fill gaps.
Mm-hmm.
With what it thinks with the data that it thinks should be there, right? That's where a hallucination comes from. I would be curious if how close I am to actually being right on this, because I feel pretty good about it. But all these court cases where attorneys have written up cases and referenced previous precedent based on this case, based on that case, and all these quotes based on this, and they're finding that those are all hallucinations from AI, and they're not checking that
I know.
work, right? They're not checking to make sure that their AI employee did a good job. They're just trusting that it did.
Yeah.
And this is where it becomes now your fault because you trusted an AI agent to do something that it didn't do well, and those attorneys are losing their degree. Maybe not their degree, they're losing their license, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and they should, to be fair, right? This is like a medical doctor saying that I plugged in a machine and I put in I told it to go remove the appendix, and the patient died. That should be the doctor's fault. It's the dog, that's something that should be taken seriously. So I think that there is a high degree of needing to make sure that you are actively supervising your AI agents, especially if you're talking more agentic AI agents that are conducting actions.
Mm-hmm.
And even if it's generative, you have to make sure that it's appropriate content.
So how do you do that? How do you supervise? Because this is a whole new way of organizing your workforce. You have kind of this digital employee, right? That everyone's kind of like, I'm not quite sure. Maybe some are excited, maybe not. But how do you kind of balance that while making sure that like this is good data? We're not just trusting that there's a part in, stall 5 when there wasn't an actual part, and there might have been a couple weeks ago, and thinks there is, but there's not.
Yeah, the answer is you still have to do the hard work, right? This AI agents don't remove the need to do hard work, right? At the end of the day, if you're going to have an AI agent involved in your business, you still have to make sure that it works properly. And there are a number of different ways that you can exemplify that, but at the end of the day, it's still about checking all the work and all of that stuff, right? So, um, the I had an example on the tip of my tongue and I've lost it.
Maybe
But
it'll come back. It's probably Jurassic Park or Star Wars. That maybe
yeah, probably something oriented towards that. But at the end of the day, when we're talking about an AI agent doing a job, you still need to supervise that. And if you're not, then you're not paying attention. And actually, I remember where I was going with this. This is where you cannot make the mistake. And we talk about this with our clients. We talk about this internally. I'm sure that our employees are sick and tired of me telling them, don't use AI for this. Do the thinking, understand it, right? Because the problem here ends up from a perspective of people letting AI do their jobs.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with that is twofold, right? One of the problems with that is if AI can do your job for you, why am I paying you money? Why am I not just having AI do your job? If AI can do your job, then why am I spending money on you? So this is a self-defensive thing, of course, from a self-preservation perspective for all of those of you who would rather get paid to do nothing, which we don't have a problem with in our business, but that's an important piece of the puzzle. And then the setting it and forgetting it AI problem becomes
Mm-hmm.
an issue of needing to make sure that we are really looking at what drives our business and
Mm-hmm.
make sure we use it as a tool. And the example I had was the quote, you can't believe everything you read on the internet. And it's attributed to Abraham Lincoln, right? it's 100% true, but he didn't say that. And the internet, of course, didn't exist when it was his time, right? So, it's those types of things that sound right, and then all of a sudden you use your head a little bit, and it's like that fish has 4 legs. Does it have the correct amount of legs? Well, it's 4, but it's a fish, right? It says, does it have any legs? And all those things that AI is getting better with, but you'll never be able to set it and forget it and say AI is going to handle all of these problems for us, and we are not going to do anything to run our own organization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a piece that the overall marketplace is getting more comfortable with. But I think with agentic AI, we're still very much on like, where does it go? Why do I need it? And in that level. So if you were walking into an organization, they identified a problem, that type of thing, and you were about to go in and kind of recommend an agentic system, would you go to a vendor or would you go to what would you do in that situation? Would you call your ERP vendor and be like, hey man, I really want to use this in supply chain. I've got this problem to solve. Like, who would you go
Yeah.
to?
Well, of course, your problem to solve first, right? So that should kind of help drive that. And in some cases, the answer is, yeah, you know what? We have a modern ERP that has some AI tools that we can use, and that's wildly helpful, right? And the rest of the conversation is around where else can we get it? What type of AI tools can we use? A lot of organizations right now, for example, ChatGPT, Copilot, they're doing great work for people.
Mm-hmm.
And the answer is for them is more of a, how do we use AI better? And as silly as it sounds, there are businesses out there that are making a ton of money just by teaching people how to talk to AI. The same way there was a need to learn how to use Google, right? What is a search engine and how do I search for things? Right? It's as silly as it sounds, and some of the younger folks out there is like, what, you just Google it. Like that was I remember when it was kind of like a right, but what do I type in? How do I search the web? Like it's a funny question. You laugh, and maybe you don't remember this, and on the
No,
old.
of course I remember that. I think I'm laughing because I'm thinking of the SNL, if you guys have never seen it, Saturday Night Lives, and the Alexa skit that they did where they like did a boomer generation of like how to use Alexa, and they call it like Allegra and like all of these different things, and obviously Alexa doesn't answer them because that's not her prompt. It also reminds me of like, who was it, Kevin Durant on Yo Google, and they're like, the engineers in the commercial were like, it doesn't say Yo Google, you have to say Hey Google, and the whole time filming it he'd be like Yo Google, and and the engineers are like, well, maybe we'll just recode it to say like Yo Google type of thing. So there's always a different learning curve um, in these types of newer pieces. I think the thing that we want to do is work with trusted vendors in that kind of
Yeah,
conversation, because every time we have a new technology in the marketplace, we see the rise of people that can talk about how they do it really well, but when it comes to actually implementing it, it's more back to the basics, right, of how do you communicate
yeah.
any sort of change within your. That's why a lot of times, if guys follow me on TikTok or anything like that, I'm very hard on change practitioners, because a lot of times change management brings out the weirdos. Okay. And so what we need to remember is this is a business strategy. So going back to the basics of how do we, communicate any new training or tool in our organization, this just happens to be a very bigger shift, right?
Well, yeah. Well, and Aaron's not wrong. KD does make the rules.
He
He's
really
Kevin
does.
Durant, right?
Yo
Like it's
Google.
a big deal.
I bet it says
Um,
Yo Google.
I bet you can't say it now. So I think you're not wrong on the you got to do your homework, right? And again, this is where I like the analogy of you're hiring an AI agent.
I think it's a helpful analysis.
You know, if you don't just that person out right out there on the street looks like they could fit. Let's go
Exactly.
bring them in. That's don't do that. You don't do it when you're hiring. You don't do it when you're buying software. You shouldn't do it when you're building an agent. And at the end of the day, build an agent with rigor, right? Ask the right questions. What do we want it to do? What is this agent's job description? And then how do we build towards that? If its job description is something that fits into your existing ERP and you're lucky enough to have that fit, great, fine. Don't spend any extra money. But because you went and had a job description for it, you realize we actually have somebody doing that job. They're just sitting over there. We should put them to work. That's a great thing to be able to say. But at the same time, if you don't have somebody already doing that job, know what that job's going to be so that you can fill that role effectively. And that's just a part of the work. It's the same thing as any type of new technology that promises to make things easier. And for a long time, we realized these are all the great and wonderful things. And look at all of the things that AI can do. The same conversations with ERP. Look at all of the things that ERP can do. And eventually, people start to realize that in the growing list of things that ERP can do, I'm starting to discover the things that it can't. In the growing list of things that AI can do, I'm starting to learn the things that it can't or shouldn't. Right? It cannot be trusted to give you perfect answers.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so, and neither can your employees, which is fine. One of the things I think is the most fun about the Jeff Bezos conversation is the case study where he wanted to do this Amazon Prime thing. He wanted so badly to do it. And he had sent his team after it go do a full blown analysis on this conversation, and they came back with a recommendation not to do it. Don't do it. It's going to bankrupt our company. And look what it's done. Right? He had all these answers from all of these very smart people. It's his responsibility to run that business, just like it's your responsibility to do your job and not trust a technology tool to do it for you. Because at the end of the day, again, if a technology tool can do your job, why do you have it?
Absolutely. Well, let's get to some of these questions. I really want to dig into like how you build it at throughout these conversations, because I think that piece of it is so hard in the fact that people don't have any idea of where to start in that. They know the problem, right? We'd love all of these things to do. And I think a lot of times what they get caught up in is they go to vendors and vendors are like, yeah, give me all your data. And then we're like, whoa, like, hold on. It's like, going to, look in my closet or something like that. Like it's a bit too familiar type of
Yeah.
thing. But I want to make sure we get to some of these questions before we kind of dig into that. So on LinkedIn, we got, how can I get AI agents to help me interact with clients in staffing and recruiting firm industry?
Yeah. So from a perspective of using AI agents with staffing and recruiting, um, this is actually a really interesting question because at some point you had to have people to people reactions, but how do I
Mhm,
use AI to set those up to be successful is what that sounds like to me, right? I want my clients to be responsive to the staffing and recruiting that I provide for them.
mhm,
And how do I get an AI agent to help me interact with those clients in doing that? Well, you could train an agent to say,
mhm,
the client has a need, right? They have I need a person for this. You can train an AI agent to ask good questions. So
mhm,
what is this person going to do? How many years of experience do they need to have, and in what? What are the job description? Like you can have an AI agent interview that. You could probably use ChatGPT for this right now, and
mhm,
simply I use it all the time. I want you to ask me questions about this topic to help me figure out what it looks like. And then it's helping me figure it out, right? So
mhm,
I want you to ask, you're a recruiting AI agent. I want you to ask this client questions about the role that they need. And when you've asked enough questions, I want you to provide a job description that they can review and provide feedback on. Go. You can use AI agents for that. And so
mhm,
then that way, what you're doing is you're getting the client to provide a description of what they need in their own words and using an AI agent to help create a job description. And then
mhm,
you tell your AI agent, once you have this all put together, provide a job description and all the other things. You might even wanted to ask the client, what are you going to pay for this? How many years of experience? What type of education? All the things that are important questions. And then you can have it say, make sure that when they say what they want to pay for this, I want you to double check their rationale on, are they paying enough for the experience that they're looking for? Do they
mhm,
have realistic expectations in this space for that market and that geographic location for that job description? What's the likelihood that they're going to pay the right amount to land a good employee for this? All of those types of things from a staffing and recruiting firm perspective, I think would be incredibly useful. And you can instruct an agent to provide that. You could probably instruct ChatGPT to do that right now.
yeah,
So have an enterprise license for it and go for it. So those are the types of things that you could do the same way if you were to ask somebody those questions,
mhm,
because you are going to write the job description. And then once the job description is written, have the client and the AI agent review it together, and then have a finalized one for you to look at, make sure it looks right,
mhm,
and then start looking at how you would fill that. And then you can use agents to say, I want you to find a list of candidates on
mhm,
LinkedIn that fit this job description. And then you can have it prioritize certain things. I want you to prioritize industry experience, and I want you to prioritize geographic location.
mhm.
Tell it to do those things, and it'll go find it.
Absolutely. I think, and a huge piece of this, that's so interesting that Mick just said, and the prompting, right? How important is the prompting? It's incredibly important. I mean, we see prompt engineers becoming, one of the, I think it was the one on one of the top 10 World Economic Forums, highest growing or fastest growing jobs. That's a critical piece, is people know how to interact with it in your
Mhm.
organization, especially when it comes to dealing with a more people focused department. Like HR or recruiting, you want to be authentic in order
Yeah.
to understand that, which is how we see a lot of people fail with AIs because they don't feel like it's answering their questions effectively. They don't utilize the bot and don't interact with it. So this is an interesting one here. Are there any departments that use AI the least in your observation?
I think this is a difficult question
Yeah,
to answer, right? I would say that human resources do not use it as much as other departments because they are more oriented towards the people side of things. And I think this is
yeah,
actually appropriate. And so, yeah, it's a difficult question to answer. I think that the folks that the departments tend to be more technically oriented are good ones. The finance, IT. I would say that now that I'm thinking about it, I would bet that manufacturing and production are
that's
going to
what
be
I was gonna say. Yeah,
lower adopters because the
yeah.
technology isn't quite as useful for them yet. So
Mhm.
that's what I would suspect.
I would also say my take on this is, do they know if they use AI? And that piece of it, while Adam gets lost in the cloud, is the biggest piece that comes into, do you actually know if you have AI in your organization? I always joke about, a sticker on your ERP system, your MES system, your RPA strategies of like, this is AI. A lot of times that's what we're having to explain to boards and bigger leadership positions is there's actually a ton of AI in your organization, and how are you leveraging what you already have as opposed to going out and having drones run around your manufacturing floor and all of those different pieces
Yeah,
of it. Are there any departments that use AI the least? I think production and manufacturing want to use it the least, but they often use it already. It just might not be, but systems writing their emails like they think and define AI. So,
yeah.
in these conversations, you have to speak the same language as an organization.
And I love this comment too. Like accounts payable gets left behind a lot of times. That's probably not untrue. And this is an unfamiliar, not unfamiliar, but unpopular thought process. But as a business, paying your vendors is less important than getting paid. We'll put it that way.
Mhm,
A lot of times I've had clients where they have ERP implementations bomb for finance. They can't do anything. What should we focus on first?
mhm,
Focus on getting paid. And somebody says,
mhm,
well, what about paying our vendors? Like, if you don't get paid, you can't pay them, right?
mhm,
So that's unpopular. It's kind of a right. If I get to choose whether or not I drink water or eat food, I kind of
mhm,
have to choose drinking water, right? Like
mhm.
it's not that I don't want to eat, but if I could eat as much as I want and still die of thirst faster than the opposite. So
Speak for
um,
yourself, man.
the sales and marketing, they get everything first. Yeah, they do. But that's more because they have this um, want to frame this as well. Sales and marketing is a little bit less. Their attention span is lower, right? They move on faster as well, right? So you get all these fancy tools. I would be willing to bet that the folks who use whose technology returns are the shortest lived and shortest sustained, I bet it would be sales and marketing, because
Oh, for
they
sure.
just simply move on from it faster, right? So yeah, they get everything first, and then all right, well, we tried that didn't work. That there's a little bit too much of that, but I think that the production side of things is definitely a side which is difficult because you're talking about people that actually run machinery. Yeah,
Mhm.
how do I do
Exactly.
this?
Yeah.
And how do I use AI for that? That's a much more difficult question to answer than it is to answer how do I determine based on this customer's
Yeah.
behavior whether or not they're going to buy something next week.
Absolutely. I think it's also that they have less technical requirements. It's easier to implement things into those types of areas of the business. I think with AI agents, that's what we're really finding is that they need to be specific to the area that you're implementing them in.
Mhm.
And that's a big piece of that. So, and let's see, this is an interesting one. Do you support AI democratization or prefer centralized control? What's your recommendation?
I think of this as I prefer more sources, and
Mhm,
I prefer a wider use. AI gets better with more data, uh,
mhm,
and control never really works, right? That's kind of the more you try to control things, the harder it gets. Think about all of the companies, for example, that tried to control whether or not somebody was going to bring a phone to work and whether or not they were going to use it. We are not a bring your own device company. Like, how's that turned out, type of thing. So um, you had to have some control over it, right? The same way, if you're going to connect your cell phone to my network, yeah, we're going to have some infrastructure around whether or not you can access these things or that things on my network in my building, right?
mhm,
Same thing with AI. If you're going to
mhm,
use AI on our infrastructure, we're going to have some controls around it. So there is a bit of that that's important. You do have to have some governance, but I'd say let them use it and train them
mhm,
how to do it well, right? That's the bigger part of it. Let people use AI, teach them how to use it well, teach them that it is not intended to replace them, and help
mhm,
them believe that, right? There's so
mhm,
much in that, which is AI is not going to replace your job. But if you become too dependent on it, it can certainly make your job less fulfilling for you and less valuable to me,
mhm,
right? If you put yourself in a position, it's the ERP is the same thing, right?
mhm,
You want me to automate the decisions that you're supposed to make. Is that what you're telling me?
mhm,
What then why are you making those decisions if a machine can do it?
mhm,
Like that's a question that yields a conversation around what is the value that individuals bring to the organization and that human beings bring to the organization. I think
mhm.
that's important to continue to consider, right? So create governance, create access, and as you create governance, make sure that you have rules around it. You don't go out onto some public AI platform, right?
Exactly.
There's a little button next to the Google
Yeah.
field that you can ask Gemini, right? Don't put your company's financials in Gemini on Google
Mhm,
if it's not privatized, right?
mhm,
So make sure you've got some firewalls, but at the same time, let people use it because they're going to anyway.
mhm.
People are
Yeah, I
bringing
think,
it to work. They are
yeah,
going to use it anyway.
it's definitely not one or the other. I think it's comes down to what is the single source of truth, right, for data, and are you all using the same data, right? That's
Mhm.
how we get into trouble is all of a sudden we're reporting revenue differently in sales and marketing than we are in accounting, than we
Yeah.
are in manufacturing, and then that's not helpful to anyone,
Mhm.
right? And so we have to understand what that means. The more that you try and lock down things, the more that you're going to get those disruptors that still
Yeah.
utilize it.
And again,
So I
people will have their phones. They have agents on their phones. Okay, they're going to use
absolutely.
it.
And I would say, we talked about this on our TikTok live, which we do 3 times a week. But we have to ensure that our front lines understand the risks associated with these types of things. Could be because 9 times out of 10, when we see a bigger cyber attack or ransomware attack, it came from a very well-intentioned employee that was just trying to do their job more efficiently or want to be innovative, and they had no idea that they were opening
Mhm.
their code up to the rest of the world. They thought they were utilizing a tool that could help them do a better job. So that's important to understand in those types of conversations.
When on this, I want to dig a level deeper on it too, because I think that something that is an important thing to remember and realize in this is there are nuances and there are levels of everything, right?
Mhm,
There is no purely democratic government on the planet, where every single person votes on every single issue, right?
Hmm.
It's predominantly, we have an election where voters are allowed to elect officials who then vote on different discussions and different topics and make different decisions, right? So there is even in the most democratic governments today. You're talking to a political science
Yeah.
major way
Thank
back
you.
in the day, right? So there's a little bit of that I'm kind of folding into this. But when we talk about democratizing AI, what it needs to that doesn't mean every single person can do whatever they want whenever they want. It still needs to have a governing body, and that
Hmm.
should be set up in your organization the same way it's set up in every other country, where the concept of democracy comes from a government of a state, a sovereign state, if you will. um, your business can take on a similar thought process with the democratization of AI, where you have structure and you have control the same way you do in a government scenario, so that you can say this type of information isn't allowed in or
Hmm.
out. It's sensitive,
Yeah,
and it can be used to make decisions internally, yes, but
for
it
sure.
isn't allowed to get out of our organization. So we need to build walls around that to protect it, and then let people run wild within the walls, right? Do whatever they want. That's fine. That's the way that should go. Because at the end of the day, if you don't create it, it will escape. If you do create it, it will probably still escape from time to time. The same way every country in this world still has external threats that come from outside and from inside, and it's all blended. But the better you're able to enable people to use it well and educate them so that they know what they're doing, they know how to be safe, the better.
Yeah, and I mean, there's always an opening for innovation. It just depends on, what you have going on. And speaking of that innovation, talk for just a little bit about how to go about building an AI agent. I'm just
Yeah.
it's so important that we get to that point of understanding what you should do and what you should not do on the kind of give the keys away type of conversation.
Yeah, and that's if you are on a Microsoft platform right now, you're using Windows, you have Word, Excel, and all that stuff. You have an AI agent. It's called Copilot. Yeah, you can use this. Now, whether or not you use it in a way that is more guarded is up to you and up to the controls that you put out there. The same way you have VPNs to get into your own email systems for your organization, right? You have the authenticator app that says, is this person logging into our domain from this location, and are they approved, right? Is this you? Are you the person that is this? So whether or not, like, how do you build one? Like, you already have one, and maybe try using it, and maybe you find that you don't need to build one, right? That's the first question. Do I need to do this? Do I need to build one? And maybe you're an Apple user, or maybe you're not the maybe you're the type that's like, look, we have all these Microsoft platforms, but Teams is a disaster. I don't like it, so we use Zoom instead. Whatever. You could use ChatGPT in the same way, right there. The Perplexity, whatever it is you like, you can go after a number of different types of agents, and you can create an enterprise version for you that locks that down and keeps that data from getting outside of your organization. So first start with that. But if you are looking to build your own agents, there are a number of different types of ways that you can do that and train those things. But you had to have good data, and you had to have a good workflow, and you had to have a good conclusion that you are trying to say. So you are going to say, I'm going to use this data to create this model that then is going to go through this workflow that's going to make these types of decisions, and then is going to create this output. So that's where you are. That's the initial steps, and then you had to have the question and the answer that you're looking for, right? You can't just ask, what is the meaning of life and everything, right? 42. You get a stupid answer to a stupid question, right? So, training people is a key part of that.
Okay. And so when we look at like to build or buy, is that the same conversation as it would be for any other enterprise solution with agents?
No, it's not. So, an enterprise solution, if we're talking enterprise applications, things that are already built, you have less control over that,
Mm-hmm.
right? Your options are fewer, unless you own your own code and you're on an on-premise system, and at that point you got a little bit more access to it. But when we're thinking about a build your own type of approach, not very many people build their own ERPs and enterprise applications, but you can build your own agents. You just have to be in a space where you are able to feed them properly, use a platform that fits with what you're using. Even like, we use N8N to
Mm-hmm.
build agents, and we do a great job with it. What you have to realize, though, is that there's a limit to the different versions on it, right? And you should, if you are an organization that has a full-blown IT environment, you should be using the enterprise version of N8N that is dependent on some type of a development platform that allows you to have an appropriate path for dev, test, deploy, GitHub type of stuff. So you should be working in that type of a manner if you're going to build your own agents. Either that, or make sure that you're using a platform that allows for at least some type of structure.
And so, do you need AI engineers if you have software engineers?
Maybe. I think is the answer, right? How good are your software engineers? Yeah, and what are the I would say that it's not as much of a, do you need electrical engineers if you have civil engineers, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
yes, because they do different things, right? They're wildly different practices. Right now, AI engineers, very many of them have a software engineering background. So you may find that your software engineers have the skill set that transfers, and that's the difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I asked because I see so many businesses come to us and say, we're hiring a fleet of AI engineers, and we're like, cool. Do you have software engineers? Like, do you is that really what you're needing because you think that you're the AI business of the future, and maybe you are, and maybe that is what you need, right? But did you actually go to your internal IT team and look at those competencies that you already have in house? And I
Yeah,
think that's one of the biggest misunderstandings of AI. Again, do you have it already? Is it already working? Do you know if it's there? Have you looked at your data? There's all of these
yeah.
different pieces that need to go into that strategic approach.
But I think this comes back to this brings the change management practitioner
Mm-hmm.
conversation full circle, right? We talked about this at the beginning. Like, a lot of folks that do all kinds of different jobs also have a change management skill set, and
Mm-hmm.
we certainly don't need to hire a change management practitioner if we're all able to do this, right? You don't need to hire an AI engineer if our team is technical enough to handle all of this work, right? A lot of the organizations that we work with, especially in specialized manufacturing, have lots of engineers that know how to
Mm-hmm.
write lots of great code.
Yeah.
They're already doing it. And
Mm-hmm.
they have learned over their 30 years of experience how to write code for more and more advanced platforms.
Mm-hmm.
You may have people who can do this. Don't just go hire
Exactly.
assuming that you
Yeah.
need something new when you haven't asked if you already had it. The same way, don't
Yeah.
go assuming that you're going to build an AI when you haven't asked and answered whether or not that's what you need and are capable of using.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all for the amazing questions. We always love going live on Friday, and it makes it so much more of a helpful and value driven conversation when we have these amazing questions. If you are watching this in the replay, I invite you to still drop your questions in because we always go back in to answer those. Also, you are welcome to reach out to us if you have specific questions about, should I use an agent for this? I know, as we talked about, it really depends on your organization. It's certainly not a one size fits all approach when it comes to any sort of technology strategy. So I know a lot of these lives, pretty much every single one, I have a conversation with one or two people about, like, hey, I have a specific question on this. Always happy to do that. So definitely reach out. You can reach us in our
Mhm.
DMs here on LinkedIn or YouTube. And then you can also reach us, Kyler at theconfluential.com, Adam at theconfluential.com. And we look forward to seeing you all next week. Please have a happy and safe Halloween this weekend.